Welcome everyone to another session of Mohanji Youth Club Crisis Management. So we covered a lot of topics during these 2 months, and today we have Shreyank with us. He will share his real life story. So thank you, Shreyank, for joining us today.
No, thank
So
you. Thank you
he
for
was
having me.
into a war zone, and not because he wanted to serve. So it happened today. Shank is 20. You are 22, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when he was 19, he decided to go to the Ukraine and to serve them. And this was like big seva that he was doing. He was bringing supplies. He was bringing smiles and sense of hope to people who had lost nearly everything. So this is not just story of logistics. It's a story of humanity, of choices, and of impact. So today we will go deeper into what it really means to step into service during real chaos. So we can start like if you would like to share your story, Shrank, how it all happened. You were only 19. Your brother was also with you, who was even younger than you. And why this idea came to your mind, and you can just share how it all happened.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Shreyank. You guys can call me Shrey. And I'll tell you guys a little bit about myself first. I've always lived in London. I was born and brought up here. And I'm 22 years old. I've just finished university. I went to University of Nottingham and I did economics. But before university, I took a gap year because I feel like before I started my work and, got into career and stuff like that, I wanted to do things that I probably wouldn't be able to do like later on in my life. And my parents are obviously quite involved with like ACT Foundation and the Mohanji Foundation. And they had an opportunity for me to go to Ukraine. And this was obviously just at the start of the Ukraine-Russia war. But they had the opportunity to go to the Romania-Ukraine border and help deliver supplies across the border. And I really wanted to do this because I've always liked doing charity, but I've always kind of liked the active side of it more, like going and actually doing things rather than just maybe, donating money or doing more passive things. I've always tried to do things by myself. So I knew this was like an opportunity that, doesn't come around a lot. You don't really get the chance to go to a war zone, see what's actually happening and actually help the people. So this is what I did. We went in about the middle of 2022, me and another group of the youth, and we traveled from London to Romania, where we stayed at the start. Um, Basically, what Mohanji Foundation did, or ACT Foundation, they had a big truck full of supplies, like full of food, full of blankets, full of everything that people need. And they drove that from London all the way to Ukraine. And we obviously flew over there just in time for the truck to reach. And our job as volunteers there was to, you know, unload everything from the truck, sort it out into like packages for to deliver to people, etc. And yeah, so that's pretty much what we did. The truck came over. We spent a few days unloading it, unloading all the food, packaging them all up into like little packages or for like one family. So each package would be for one family. And then we started crossing the border. Some days we went over and stayed in Ukraine. Some days we went over and came back. And we went to so many different like refugee centers where people had stayed and had to flee from their homes and come to, which were relatively safer areas. So we went there, and one thing that I remember really clearly, which is probably kind of like the crisis part of the whole experience, was on our last day in Ukraine, we actually got a text on our phones saying that there was a bomb threat in our area that day. And obviously, this was a pretty big thing for us. I don't think anyone had ever been in a situation where, like, They were like fearing for their lives. But, it's kind of, I mean, it's an extreme case of a crisis, but it's just one type of crisis that everyone kind of, you know, experiences in their day-to-day lives. Um, so the way I handled it then is kind of similar in the way that I would handle any other crisis that I go through, whether it's at university, work, etc. What I kind of did is I remained calm. Like, I know that obviously it's a very scary thing knowing that, a bomb could hit near you, but I kind of have the ideology that you should, instead of just being scared and like letting that overcome you, you need to try and like put yourself to use in another way. So for us as a group, what we started doing straight away is talking to the locals, talking to the hotel that we're staying at, talking to everyone around us who had more experience being in that kind of situation than us, and asking them like, what are the closest refugee places, the bunkers that we stay to, how does it work, like when does the warning come, etc. And once we got all of this information, instead of just like obviously panicking, we put in a lot of effort to make sure that we're fully informed with what to do. And that immediately put us a little bit more to rest, right? Like knowing that, other people have gone through situations like this, they know where to go, etc., etc. And that kind of leads me on to my second point, which is like whenever you're in a crisis, I feel like reaching out to other people is something that a lot of people don't do. A lot of people, when they're going through a crisis, tend to keep it to themselves. They tend to try and work it out by themselves. But in reality, like the strongest things about having connections and friends is that you can use them when you really need them. So yeah, those were probably the two main points that I wanted to bring up about like this, obviously quite an extreme crisis that I went through. But I really think that it's something that can be applicable to loads of areas of life if you want to use them.
Thank you so much. What actually made you to say yes to some to go to a situation like this? You have this like how you made your decision, and second part is like your mindset when you decided to go. What was in your mind? So you definitely are brave, and there was some mindset for that to say yes in such a young age to go there. If you would like to just share about that.
Sure. So again, I feel like I've always been a bit of like an adventurous person. Even just before I went to Ukraine, in that year I volunteered in South America. So I went and lived with like tribes in the jungles and stuff like that. But that's another story. But I've always felt like I really enjoyed kind of getting out of my comfort zone, stepping out of my comfort zone and doing different things. And this, the chance to go to a war zone really like kind of piqued my curiosity. Maybe I probably should have been a little bit more scared at the start, but for me, it more seemed like an opportunity than something to be scared of. I also had trust in myself that, and the people around me that, we knew what to do. Like, I know that ACT Foundation, or especially like my parents, wouldn't put me into a situation where they know that, I have a really high chance of getting hurt or anything like that. So it's more about like me staying calm, knowing that, I'll be okay. I've got people around me that can help. And also the kind of personality that I have. I've really wanted to be involved in things, like I said before. Like when I do charitable things, I've always wanted to get involved in them actively rather than more passively. And you talked about what I was feeling when I first went. I, truthfully, obviously, it was a little bit nerve-wracking, especially I remember traveling into Ukraine. You see like all of these tanks and all of the army soldiers around, and it really is a different environment. But it's more about like I think what made up for it is the fact that when we got to like the refugee centers, we helped out at different places like dog shelters as well, like seeing the people like and animals that we could have helped. I think that really made up for me like the the nervousness I was feeling before.
Thank you so much for sharing. And about being adventure, like person who likes adventure, that's definitely that was definitely in you. So you were brave to go there, and trust in yourself. which like even when we were scheduling this meeting, you are a totally like confident person, which is for you so amazing, and you're really truly example. So thank you for sharing all this. I have one question regarding there was probably sometimes when you had thoughts of or feelings of fear that happened, maybe when you were going there, and maybe some thoughts were crossing your mind. How did you manage to go through them? And do you have any suggestions when we are going through the fear, even not in crisis situation, how to face it?
Sure. So the way that I really think about it is 90% of the fear that you have is created by yourself. Um, whether you're going to a war zone, whether you're just before an exam, whether you're starting a new job, whether you've got an interview, anything like that, most of the fear, like, all just comes from up here. And that's really just been my ideology, knowing that if you can control your mind, like, and, you know, tell yourself that you're not scared, or try and think about other ways, or use resources like, friends, family, people around you to help you, that's the best way to kind of combat fear. And similarly thinking, the worst way to deal with fear is to kind of get obsessed with it, overthink about it, keep like building it up in your own mind, because that's when fear can be a lot bigger than you actually think. Like when I was in Ukraine and I got that bomb message, I'll admit at the start, of course, it was very scary, but I didn't let myself like spiral with the thoughts like, oh my God, what am I going to do if a bomb comes? Oh, I can't see my friends again. I can't see my family again. What am I going to do? Like, what if I can't play any more sports? Blah, blah. Like, instead of thinking about all of those things that, you definitely could think about if you're in that situation, you just have to kind of think of it in a different way. Like, like I really do think that a lot of fear just comes from your own brain, and you finding different ways to think about it is the best way to kind of combat it.
Amazing. So if you agree, there was like a lot of acceptance in that situation. Okay, things are happening, and actually, a fear in that moment is normal. Like, okay, there is bomb threat, so some things maybe can happen, but anyway, you were there. You could not change it. You're trying to calm yourself, and you realize how mind is really like powerful. Yeah, some people could come into panic attacks in these situations, but at the end, you switch off and you change your attitude totally. So. Can you say something about acceptance? You definitely were living it, and you are living it. So, like how to accept the if you're, let's say, into the fear or things like that, how to accept the situation for those one who are facing any kind of crisis situations.
Yeah. So even thinking about other normal situations, like for me this year at university, for example, I've been doing a lot of job applications and I've had to do a lot of interviews. And interviews at the start, I was really nervous for. I remember like I would come into an interview room and I'll just immediately start thinking like, oh, what happens if I don't get this interview? Or maybe I won't get another opportunity, stuff like that. And instead of thinking in that way, like you said, just accepting that you're in this situation, and more than just accepting it, almost like kind of flipping the script in your head. So for myself, what worked for me is, instead of thinking, oh no, what am I going to do if I don't get the job after this interview? What if I don't get to the next stage? What if I don't get any more interviews? I just thought to myself like, okay, well, they've picked me for an interview out of like whatever hundreds of other people. There must be a reason that I'm here. There must be like something that's good about me for them to pick me in this situation. So just flipping the script in your own head, instead of thinking about the negative things, accepting that yes, you're going to be nervous. It's an interview. That's how it's meant to be. And I think if you weren't nervous at an interview, that would just be weird. But changing it in a way that, makes you stop thinking about the negatives, more about the positives, and that in turn, I think will help you perform better in whatever like crisis sort of situation you're in.
Wow. Thank you for sharing these tips and tricks, which are very important on a daily basis for all of us. That makes you definitely confident more when you accept the situation and when you switch off from negative thoughts to the positive one. I wanted to ask you something about refugee camps. So when you were there, so the situation was definitely sad and in can you share what touched you there? Maybe if you saw some children or what was the most touchable seeing these kind of environments?
Yeah, I mean, for me, every refugee camp was different, but something that I really remembered was thinking about how, like, the children had kind of been, ripped away from their town, their school, their friends, and they've had to come to a random place, by themselves. They don't know anyone else there. There might not even be any more kids there. I remember one of the first refugee camps we went to, there weren't a lot of people there, but there were like three or four kids who were small. But then there was one kid who was like 15, 16, so relatively close age to me. And I could tell straight away that, obviously he'd been taken away from all of his friends. There's not even anyone else near to his age that he's with at the refugee camp. And that was something that was really sad. Like I know that especially for me, like I'm someone who, always wants to be around people. I'll definitely get very bored by myself, probably a bit sad by myself. And seeing that someone's, kind of had their life ripped away from them like that wasn't nice to see. And it was also more like when we came, we were all similar ages to that kid. And like the happiness that he felt when we like played sports together, he finally had someone to play sports with. I remember me and him had like a push-up competition and stuff like that, like just stuff like that for fun. But it was stuff that I can tell that he hadn't experienced in a while. And that was something that was obviously quite touching, knowing that, this was just one refugee camp, this was just one kid, but realistically, all over the world and all the horrible situations that's happening, there's probably thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands, of these kids that have been ripped away from their old life and kind of have to just deal with the consequences.
Did you and you said like that you were also we didn't share this at the beginning that you were also serving in a dog shelter. So you actually experienced everything through traveling, doing seva, being in refugee camps, and then at the end in a dog shelter. How what was happening there and what impact it had on you?
Yeah, I really like the ideology that, the ACT Foundation and Mohanji Foundation had is that every life is a life. And I could really f feel that when I went to Ukraine because obviously it's such a bad situation. It's a huge crisis that's going on. And all of the efforts are kind of going towards, humans that are in trouble as they should, right? But it was so clear that the switch between, people caring before about other things, like, for example, the dog shelter, almost kind of switched off. And I thought it was really sad. It was like, yes, a lot of these humans need help, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to just completely forget about everyone else that's going through the same thing. So we got called up to a dog shelter that was pretty much abandoned. I think there was only two workers there left. They had no like dog food, no supplies or anything like that. And we took out like some extra time from our trip to, you know, get the dog food, buy the dog food, bring a lot of it over to that shelter. Because, just because they're dogs doesn't mean that they don't need to receive the same amount of help that any human refugee would receive. And yeah, so that was a really nice experience for me. And it's something that I think a lot of people overlook, right? Like a lot of the news you'll see is, all the children and the people who are suffering. But if you think about it further on, like when humans are suffering, I feel like animals are also suffering, if not even more. I couldn't even think about the amount of pets that had been left in their homes or like weren't able to be taken to the camps, etc. So it's quite sad to think about, but I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to, help humans, but also help animals.
You are serving actually all the beings. This is really like amazing experiences and definitely tough one because to see these beings like in these conditions, it is not easy. And how these experiences change the way you see the world, like and your life actually before and after. Definitely, there are a big switch in you to experience this.
Yeah, I mean, I think going around to, Ukraine, I spent a lot of time in South America. um, kind of that was the first kind of time that I got to see people who were like really, in poverty in refugee camps. And I think it overall the experience made me a lot more grateful for the things that I have. Before I feel like a lot of people when, for example, for like me and my family, we've never really moved away from London. We've always lived in our house. We've never had to go and see the kind of hardships that people see. And as a kid, I can tell that sometimes I was definitely very ungrateful for some things, like, whether it was the food that I liked or, just even having access to water, hot water, things like that. It is something that I learned a lot when I got to see people who actually have to struggle without these things. And something that was really striking was the happiness that people had, even though they didn't have these things. Like, this is besides the point, but when I was in South America, I remember I lived with the tribe with these little kids, and these little kids were there and they had very little water. Literally all they ate was potatoes every day. That's all they could eat. That's all the crop that they could eat. And they were still so happy. They were so grateful for every meal. They loved eating their food. They loved playing. They used to play football with like it wasn't even a football, but it was like a little soft sponge thing. And they would still go and play with it all the time and have fun together. And it really shows you that, they really have like the bare minimum and they're still running around with a smile on their face all the time, really enjoying their life. And yeah, that was definitely a big takeaway that I took. I noticed someone wrote something in the chat.
Yeah,
What the
thank you for being
activity
yeah, thank you for being honest, for being like saying that sometimes we're not grateful for the things that's happening for all of us. That's why it's really nice that you're here to sharing and reminding us. Yes, there is a question. What were the activities in the refugee shelters? Just bringing food and supplies, or you were spending time with the people? And thank you for questioning, Ika.
Sure. So yeah, definitely a lot of the time during the trip was unpacking the food, repacking it, and bringing it to the people. And I think everyone was obviously very grateful for the food. We brought them like food, water, drinks, soap, all the necessities that people need. But I think what they really enjoyed was having other people there to spend time with. And that's what we did. We did spend a lot of time with them and sorry. And what I kind of realized is that the people were really grateful that, they were almost cared about. We had told them, we'd come all the way from London because we really wanted to help them and, we feel really sorry for them. And, even the fact that they knew that there were people from, willing to travel across Europe to come and help them, I think that also just us being there made them feel better. So yeah, as important as, giving food and supplies was, spending time with them was what I found the most important and also what I think they found the most important.
Wow, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing this. Would you like to share what did you discover actually about yourself that you didn't know before this trip?
What I discovered about myself. Um, I think that, traveling in that kind of scenario, you do learn a lot about yourself. Something that and not just learn, I feel like you can definitely change a lot as a person as well. For me, something that I'm very grateful for is that I feel like when I travel to these places, whether it's South America or Ukraine, I definitely gained a lot of confidence in myself. I used to, be someone that wasn't as talkative. I didn't used to, try and, socialize with people that much, etc. But when I got to these kind of situations where, you know, these people are really like needing help and they, they want someone to talk to, they want someone to play with, it made me realize that yeah, like sometimes I need to step up and be that type of person. Whether that's, I use that later on in my university life. It made me a lot more social and, I was definitely open to make more friends. It's helped me during my work. It's, whether I'm in like a client meeting or an interview or whatever it is, like being more confident in myself, like understanding like the type of person that I can be if I want to has really helped me.
It's really important to know yourself, and you can always, grow all the time, which you are doing. And do you have any advice to someone, for the youth, of course, who wants to step into maybe crisis management or some seva, but they're maybe afraid, or how to help them from feeling powerless, to have this courage to do it.
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't think I'm the person who has like, the most wisdom or anything like that to be giving advice to people, but for me what helps is kind of just think less almost. Stop having like those doubts in yourself, stop hesitating so much when you want to do something. It doesn't have to be something as big as going to another country, right, to volunteer. Even if it's, oh, should I go, buy this homeless person a bit of food? Should I go volunteer at this charity shop? Whatever help you want to do, instead of just thinking like, oh, should I actually give this person food? Like, oh, do I have time to go into the shop and give it to them? Just kind of just do it. Like, kind of get rid of that hesitation in your life. The sense of overthinking as well, I think is huge. Like, it's something that, you know, helps me out, I think, in every crisis, big or small. Again, just like emphasizing the fact that a lot of the fear and problems that you have are driven by your own brain. So if you can learn to kind of control that and cut that out, it will help you so much in whatever you want to do.
Amazing. And are you always like this, like aware of your mind? And for you, it sounds that it's so easy to change, from negative. That you're very aware actually, because if you're not aware, you will definitely be maybe in panic attack or something. Did you learn it, or is it like natural for you?
I mean, I'm sure for some people it comes across naturally. But if it doesn't, that doesn't mean that you can never have that, right? I think it is definitely a powerful skill to, have a bit more control over your emotions, be calm in situations, etc. But it's also just as important to know that, if you're naturally not like that, if you're naturally a little bit more emotional, if you're naturally get a bit more stressed or anxious, that doesn't mean that you have to always be like that. Like I know so many of my friends, I just know people who have changed so much as they've got older. They may have, been very stressful, very paranoid before. Like I used to know one of my close friends used to get so paranoid before every exam she did. And she's kind of like, as she's got older, she's, learned of ways to kind of, little techniques that she does. And I think she does some like breathing techniques and stuff like that, but to kind of help her get over that hurdle. But for her, like it really shows you that just because you don't have something right now, like, you might not be the calmest person, you can really work on that for yourself to get that. So for me especially, I don't think I think I was always relatively calm, but like I've definitely improved on it as I've got older. Like just all I wanted to say is like if you really feel like, you're someone who struggles right now with, overthinking a lot, struggling to control your emotions, it's not, you don't have to always be like that. It's something that can definitely change and you just need to kind of work on it yourself.
Amazing. So we need to think less and less doubts and have more like faith in ourselves. And wherever we are, to know that we can, change. There is one more um, comment. So seeing all the casualties and loss of infrastructure, loss of lives and environmental damage, do you believe the people can go back to these usual lives after these hardships? And if yes, how long do you believe it could take? Amazing question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, you know, it definitely depends on the person. I know some people can have bad experiences that happen in their life and that kind of just makes them spiral and they never kind of recover from it. But I also know that there are a lot of people who have come from from really bad hardships and come back and if anything, have come back even better than they were before. One of my close friends like suffered a lot with drug addiction in school, and it was something that, obviously firsthand seeing, like I could see the hardships that he was going through. But now he's actually turned out to be a much more confident person. I think he's much more secure in himself. I think he's also much more like outgoing, etc. after he's kind of gotten over that hurdle. So yeah, hardships in everyone life in everyone's life is bad. We know that, but it's more important, how you kind of pick yourself up after that, and you definitely can not even just go back to your usual life, but live a better life. I think specifically with Ukraine, obviously there's a big loss of infrastructure. There is, as you said, there's lots of loss of lives. People have lost lots of people in their family. But at the same time, like going through that kind of experience makes people stronger, right? And, I'm sure the kids that I met in the refugee camp, obviously I don't have contact with them now, but, they've definitely become stronger people after that experience. And I hope that they kind of use that in their future lives to become better versions of themselves.
Anyone is open to ask any questions. I have the last one until others prepare them.
I have some question. Tonka, you've been in Libya when was the civil war, so you can share something about that.
I can share shortly, but then we can focus on Shreyank or any questions. So yes, I'm the similar like you, very adventure person, and for me this is natural actually to I don't know. I always wanted also this kind of situation. And I was working as a flight attendant for 10 years. And when I was 21, my first flights were to Libya. So we were charter company, and then we went there. So we were like, our plane was there for 2 years. And then we would like be 3 weeks or 5 weeks there, then a few days at home, and always going there. And at that moment, there was a civil war. So for me, at that moment, I was really like so brave. I didn't even want to. Yeah, I just told my parents, don't watch the TV. First of all, I was very passionate about that job, and I had a lot of faith. That's also really like important. And I'm not person of panicking. I don't know. I just wanted adventures. And what I can share that, yeah, sometimes like. When during the night we would hear bombing or things like that, then you're there, then thoughts are happening naturally, like of fear and things. Why I'm doing here, is this normal, because and what also I can share, uh, of course we were safe, and actually at last moment we went from Libya back home, and then 2 weeks later they bombarded all the airports, so actually we could be in danger, but we were not. And one more thing, we didn't have internet in our hotel. So every day if you want, to be in contact with your family and you're there for a few weeks, you need to go to the other hotel where we could find, internet. So I was like, it would be thoughts, okay, should I go? Maybe fear starts. And then, when I see the others also like, okay, I need to call my mom at some point or something, then I would like just go. So these kind of thoughts are natural, but I was also saying, okay, we were trying to be, you cannot stop living in these kind of situations. Also, these people who are now in the war, there are a lot of people. We have one member who she's now facing war in Iran. So these people also, we are in touch on phone. You need to go on with life, because life brings you situations which you need to accept and face at some point, because if you're in panic, you cannot calm yourself or others. So yeah, definitely acceptance and this faith in life, actually, in yourself. Okay, first of all, I can handle it, and second of all, if I'm in this situation that life gave me, I will try to do my best. Of course, I will not go where they're putting bombs, and things like that, but yeah, we can share it on some other Zoom meeting. But yeah, that's definitely, it was natural for me to do that, because there were people who didn't want to go in Libya. They quit the job, and even pilots. And what I realized there, young people and women, they were the bravest one. That's what I can say. Young people are there, like there is something in youth. I feel, because we are easily to change our minds. It's for us, it's easier than for the others. Yes, Eka, you can share. There is a question. Eka, I think it's best that you type, or we can try again. If forced to take a life, how easy would it be to be decisive in the situation, given that it's for the sake of protecting yourself with or without someone accompanying you? Sorry for my reading. This is for Shreyank.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's a very extreme situation, right? I'd assume that most people would never have to take a life. Um, for me, I've never had to be in that situation, so I can't really comment on it. But I did used to do a lot of cadet work when I was in school. So I'd worked like, in the UK Army and I'd, talk to officers who would definitely have to be in that situation. And again, I think that it can just kind of be stretched into, obviously this is at the very end of the spectrum, like, very extreme, but it's just all about decision making, really. Like, we know that people, whether you work in the police, you work in the army, sometimes you are forced to take a life, and it happens. If you need to take one life to save 100, I'm sure that most people would do that. But again, like, it's more about just decision making in general. Like, if you ever have to be in the, position where you have to do something that extreme, hopefully you'd only be in that position because, people know that your decision making is really good. People know that people in the police, the majority of them, their decision making is good. Any people in the army or any officers, their decision making is good. So I guess that just comes with experience with whatever you do. Like, the more extreme things that you have to do, the better your decision making has to be. That would just be my opinion on that.
Eka, can you try now or you are writing? We can try again. It was long
So,
question,
yeah,
definitely
it's
important.
a little bit now.
We cannot hear, yeah. Sorry.
No.
She will write. Anyone else would like to ask questions? This is really like opportunity for anything that you feel. If you had one message for the generation of young people about courage and about compassion, what would you say to them? Or about daily life, actually, because, yeah, about that.
Yeah, I would say, you know, make sure you use, like, I definitely have the ideology that your brains are really powerful and they could be used in a good or a bad way. So make sure that you use your powers in a good way. Don't let yourself, get overwhelmed by negativity, etc. Always try and be positive. Um, Always make sure that you use the people around you to help you. Don't try and go through things by yourself. You know, people, your friends, your family, people around you are there for a reason. And, using them to help you get over things or using them for advice is always something that I kind of didn't really do much when I was younger, but I've done a lot more as I've grown older, and I realized that my life has gotten a lot easier. When you're open to asking questions, open to asking for help, it's not something that you should be afraid of. And that's something that I would urge everyone to do, like, if you don't do it already.
Amazing. You're still young, 22, and with the 19 you went there. So definitely so many things you can make in life. And definitely after going out of comfort zone, in general in life, it push you, to grow. What would you say about, yeah, going out of comfort zone? This one, you're were really like brave and extra, like going into the, totally different environment. Do you have any advice or thoughts about it?
Yeah. So I think there was a similar question in the chat, like getting out of your comfort zone. Um, for me specifically, when I
I
was,
ask the same. Can you speak about getting out of the comfort zone? Because you didn't know what will happen there. Where will you will be accommodated? Did you have to prepare yourself, or you had experience from previous travel, like living in South Africa, like how to approach the people, especially vulnerable?
yeah, I mean, I guess everyone is different, right? I've always felt like I've been very lucky in the way that I'm not really scared to get out of my comfort zone. So for me specifically, I went to Peru and South America all by myself. Like, I luckily I knew someone there that I was going to be staying with, but apart from that, I had no plans. I had no idea what it was like traveling by myself, but that never really scared me. I guess I'm lucky in that way that, I didn't try and let myself overthink about it. I kind of just went with the flow and did that. And that's just kind of the person that I've been with. And I guess people are different. Again, like I said, just because you are the way that you are doesn't mean that you can't change. So if you guys, you know, are listening to my story and think like, oh, how did he go to South America by himself when he was 18, blah, blah, blah. Not everyone starts off in life the way that they want to be, if you as a person are scared about doing things by yourself, you're scared to get yourself into new situations, or in general getting out of your comfort zone, it's something that will happen with time, right? You need to be used to doing things that you wouldn't normally do. And I remember, I think I actually watched something about this, but specifically getting out of your comfort zone, even doing little things like, when you're walking down the street, or if you're standing next to the bus stop, you just say hi to the person next to you, something like that. Or, if you're getting a coffee, you just, have a conversation with the barista or whatever. Things that you wouldn't normally do, but it's such a little thing, right? Like anyone can just talk to the person sitting next to them at the bus stop, and, it's not like it's going to make a huge difference to their life, right? But doing small actions like that, I think can really build up confidence on people getting out of their comfort zone. And that's something that I've definitely seen a lot of people do, and I've seen how it works. And that's probably the advice I'd give.
Amazing advice. And you're like our coach. I feel like that. Like you said, wherever you are, you can change. I read somewhere like the same sentence, if you don't like your job, or if you're in a relationship that you don't like or whatever, like you're not a tree, move from the things. And wherever you are, you can change. And these sessions are like pure example, you know, of young generations, of young people who are maybe facing some fears or something. So when they hear your story, that can empower a lot of people. And like you said, small actions are making you more confident. So just small steps can change the world. There is comment, this is amazing. And question is, how do you manage many people during the situation of crisis, and communicating with them is difficult? Let's just say these type of people just freeze, or they need a reason for whatever we're asking them to do, and we are running out of time in these kind of situations.
Yeah, I mean, being in a crisis itself is difficult enough. Being in a crisis with different people with you just makes it 10 times harder, right? Because to some extent you can control yourself. Like this is what I've been talking about the whole time, like controlling your brain, controlling your kind of, thoughts that you have to minimize your fear, etc. But you can't control others, and that's where a lot of difficulties can come through. I mean, what I would probably say about that is to just realize that it is something that's out of your control, right? And to not be afraid of it. Like just because something's out of your control and you don't really know what's going to happen doesn't mean that you have to fear it, right? We're all going to be in situations where we're going to be around people who think differently than us, act differently than us, and there's just not much we can do about it. The worst thing you can do is kind of, get frustrated that, they're not exactly like you, frustrating that they're doing things differently to you. So again, like especially communicating with different people, whether you're their teammates, clients, friends, whatever they are, just be mindful that, they're different people to you. They do things differently. They may react differently. And of course you can give people advice. That's what I would do. Like, if someone is really struggling with something, if we're in a crisis and they're doing something wrong, give your advice to them. Don't force anything onto them like that, because if anything, that's probably just going to make the situation worse. But give your advice, be open to advice yourself, and just realize that, they're different people to you. They're going to handle things and they're going to handle situations in different ways to you. And you kind of just have to work your way around that, like whatever the situation may be.
Amazing. Like you said, don't be afraid. And there are people who you cannot change, our situation that you cannot change. And this is again about acceptance, which is so natural to you. You do not have resistance in these situations. And also you're like leading as example, you're calm, and then your presence will speak as, if you're arguing with them, or if you're trying to spread panic, it will be even worse. So I think in these situations, you try to do your best and accept it as much as possible. We are actually out of time, but if anyone has any questions, you can feel free to share, to ask, to add something. What did you like about these stories and everything? And thank you, Shreyank. The story is amazing, and your presence here really means a lot, because you're totally calm, and example of young leader.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, I mean, again, like I said, everyone's different. I might seem calm on this call, but I know there's definitely things that I've done wrong and, things that a lot of other people do better. So, again, everyone has their own strengths and just, realize if I had to say one thing for everyone to take away is to, realize that you can change yourself. You don't have to be the same that way that you were 10 years ago. I really liked what Antonia said about, you're not a tree, you can move. And if you like something that you see, if you like a certain person, the way that they've been acting, of course, you can change yourself to be more like them. That's all I'd say.
Amazing. There's one comment. Thank you so much. This is really inspiring, especially all the advice. They're very useful. Yeah, I didn't know that you will have so many advices, which really are powerful. And we have more. We are really grateful that you have more questions. So just keep going. I hope Shreyank has time. How are the people in the refugee camps? Were they bitter about the situations they were put by the opposition country? I've heard people in extreme situations can change their way they see the world and stop believing in others in extreme cases, like in some youth in some country undergoing war. I won't take name, of course, tend to take arms in their hands for justice and are called terrorists by others.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're talking about really the most extreme situations in life. And when you're put into those situations, of course, it's going to change you. I of course noticed people that were bitter, some kids that, were more violent for some reasons because of the things that they'd seen or gone through. But again, it kind of just goes back to the way that the thing that I'm saying is, again, you can change just because you've gone through such a difficult situation. And, of course, you can be bitter about it, you can be upset, you can become violent, etc. And we've seen that all over the news. We've seen that all the time. Again, you don't have to let that define you. You don't have to, just because you went through such a horrible thing 10 years ago, you don't have to let your life and your actions be defined by that. And again, like, of course, everyone has seen examples of, things like terrorism that has happened as a result of war. But the same way, I'd say there are so many people that have gone through terrible things like war and have come out and become amazing people and, change things for the betterment of the whole world. So, as you can see on the news, maybe a terrible person because of, what they've gone through. You can also see probably 10 people that have, gone through terrible things and have now worked to try and change the world in a more positive way. So it's really just the way that you look at things. There's always going to be negative things in the world, but it's your choice whether you want to focus on that or not.
I like the way it's always the way you see the world and the things. There is a comment. First, thanks for sharing all the stories and experiences with us. And second, it's up to people who they choose their heroes. That is also true, yeah.
Exactly. Like I mentioned before, like I had a friend that struggled with drug addiction. They could have chosen to, become bitter about it, maybe carried on their drug use, maybe just, become a completely different person. But instead they chose to, they now do a lot of work for like helping fight drug addiction with youth, etc. So, it just depends what you want to do. Just because you went through something like that doesn't mean that it can define the rest of your life. Yeah, exactly.
Anyone else has any question? Or would like to share something? I would like to ask you, so after hearing this story, what would you think about, would you do the same like Shreyank went? Are you the person who would go to do the seva like that? Or what do you think? That's just like to go introspective. Like, do you think you will have fear? Or you think you would like to try something like that? There is one more comment. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. Did you ever thought about like going into a situation like Shreyank in a way of serving in a way of helping people would like to go. I also got really inspired, and I totally resonate with you because from my point of view, like life is so short and sometimes I will say boring. Not in a way, I will go into the drugs because it's boring, but let's do big things because, we can. That's my point of view. I would also like to go to Peru and things like that. It always interested me. And the others, Luce, Eka, you said. Mihailo, would you like to share? Lucia would also like to help. Yeah. Okay, you cannot speak. You will type. And from any stage, it doesn't mean you need to be inspired for this. This is just like to think about. I just asked because it came to me. Yes. I think we can actually switch the close up the session because we are out of time and there are no more questions. But this was really, really inspiring and yeah, like I shared, your presence is totally calm and amazing. So thank you for sharing. You're definitely inspiration to all of us, especially about all these suggestions about not being afraid, having faith more in yourself, changing perception in life, doing small steps to change, and always see, wherever you are, you can go in some other way. And each story is different, like you said, how you, yeah, affinities for lives are different. Mihail is typing, I think. Are you? Okay, we will wait just for a comment.
Oh yeah, you said it perfectly well. I think there's a lot of stuff you can learn from people. Just because you heard of my, bit of an extreme story going to Ukraine doesn't mean that you guys need to suddenly do something like that to feel like you're helping. You can all do little things and all your little things add up as well.
Mihailo shared, I will see what a task is. I've recently been very unavailable for most things, even socially. So depending on my skill for the task at hand, helping if possible is definitely something I'd like to do. Yeah, it's always important that we know ourselves. Someone are more extroverts, some are more introverts. It's nothing, it's totally normal, and it's good that we know where we are. And yeah, that's good. Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here for the last session in July. So we are 2 months together now, and it was really nice to have you, Shreyank. And thank you for being so easygoing. I cannot explain you how easygoing this was. So yeah, amazing.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It was really
Thank
nice.
you.
All the
And
questions.
yeah, we will be in touch all. Bye.
Of course.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.